Hey guys, all my videos are spontaneous, but this one's a little bit extra spontaneous.
À-bas-le-ciel.
I was just sitting here reading Aristotle, and it occurred to me to try to do a video covering two topics in one, kind of compare and contrast them, because I've got such a long list of topics I'd like to get to before I run out of time this month. When September 1st rolls around, I'm back to school, and my video making days are over for a semester at least. Um, you know, two of the stupidest debates I've ever engaged in on the internet. Um, Both of them I know for a fact really help people. So when I was in France recently, I met face to face with someone who's a longtime viewer of the channel, longtime fan and supporter of the channel, and she told me right at the end of talking as a total non sequitur, she said, the videos you made talking about secondhand leather really impacted me and really changed my life. I was like, oh, okay. And it was just kind of, wasn't the topic we'd been discussing at all. It wasn't a natural segue. But, I appreciated her telling me. I said, oh, wow, thanks. And she went on to explain that for years, she'd felt totally fine about the fact that her car had leather seats. She got into the details of when she bought the car and so on. She told herself it was secondhand leather, it was okay, and so on. Then she watched the videos I did on that topic, questioning the ethics of secondhand leather, and it really changed her perspective. It really changed the way that she felt about it, forever. And she said she really thinks about it now, I don't know, every day or every week or something, that it really haunts her. She mentioned a couple other ways in which my videos had, in that sense, negatively impacted her life. I mean, it's a positive. She appreciates it. She feels she has a deeper appreciation for some of these issues in her life, but she does feel badly about them. She regrets the decisions she made in the past. She wouldn't make the same decisions again in future because of the burden my channel has put on her shoulders. You know, but the actual origin of those videos about secondhand leather was one of the stupidest, to me, astoundingly stupid discussions or arguments I've ever had with anyone on the internet. And the guy I was talking to, this was over Discord, so it was live voice chat with an audience, with witnesses. He had all these really, really weak reasons for why he, as a quote unquote vegan, would wear leather, including that he cares a lot about fashion, he cares a lot about looking stylish and this sort of thing. Would he accept that excuse from someone else? I mean, it's just, to me, it's mind blowing for someone who calls themselves an ethical vegan to make that excuse. And he was, I could hear the tone of his voice and everything. He was being dead serious. And I asked him a really simple question in response, and this comes to the kind of profound link between the two topics I'm dealing with in this video. I asked him, would you wear your secondhand leather coat to an animal rights demonstration? Would you wear it to a vegan protest or a vegan meetup? As the exact same excuses you're giving me here. You've just told me with passion and conviction how, oh, no, it's okay, it's totally all right, it's totally fine, it's no problem, because it's you got it secondhand, and in one case it was like a hand me down from his brother or something. His brother had been wearing the coat, and then his brother didn't have any use for it anymore. With each of these leather and fur coats he owned, he had a different excuse for why the bad karma didn't get allotted to him. And of course, suddenly the question is in a very different frame of reference. And why? Simply because someone is watching. Simply because there's a role for observation, for the observer. We have a witness, right? Now, I think it's a very sad thing about human nature that we don't value our own judgment as much as we value the judgment of an anonymous stranger or group of strangers or peer group, right? Now, of course, this isn't something inescapable. This isn't something that we're born with and can never change in human nature. But I think as teenagers or as children are growing up, a lot of us instinctually act and think this way. This is part of, if you like, the unexamined life that's not worth living, and we have to examine our way out of with philosophy. But if somebody told you, and you may in your life you may encounter people who say this, somebody told you that they were vegetarian only when there were other people around to see them, but that they were willing to eat meat when nobody else was around, when there were no witnesses. What would you think of that person? What do you mean nobody's around. What do you mean? Oh, well, nobody's going to know. You will. You'll know. Aren't you the most important witness of all? Aren't you the one who makes the decision and bears the consequences? And look, there are many consequences to talk about here. Yeah. You can talk about ecology, you can talk about the animals, you can talk about your health. But I say this again and again. Ultimately, the product we're questioning here is not the leather jacket. It's not a candy bar. It's not popcorn. It's not anything that comes in a package. The ultimate product here is you. The question we're going to ask and we're going to answer is, what kind of person do you want to be? Now, if you're Muslim and you believe in eating only halal meat, then you're going to do that even when you're all alone and there are no witnesses and there's nobody to hold you accountable, because you are going to hold yourself accountable. If you're Jewish and you believe in only eating kosher food, if you're Jain and you only believe in following the Jain religion's set of dietary laws, then it's not going to rest on whether or not you can get away with it and whether or not there are witnesses, because we know there's one witness in the room, and it's the witness that matters most of all. Again, I think just if you take, life and politics and ethics seriously, if you take things seriously, that's really all there is to it. And for me, this is linked to another one of what I think are kind of the stupidest conversations or debates that have ever been engaged on the internet. That's been the debate with the anti-natalists.
Child-free is a different kind of idea. That has more to do with, I'm not an idiot. I'm not smart enough to know life is stupid, but I am smart enough to know kids are a pain in the ass, and I don't have any use for one. They're not going to do anything for me. I'm going to have to do a bunch of shit for them, and I don't know how I win in that game. Our existence, we come into the world breaking, broken. And all we do is spend the rest of our lives trying to glue ourselves back together, and that's it. We don't accomplish anything.
But one of the things I've pointed out in debates with and debates about anti-natalists is their view of the world depends on a notion of objective tragedy, objectively real values. I think this is true in both cases. I'll come back to the secondhand fur coat. At its most basic, there's a clinging to a notion that moral values are objectively real apart from the perspective of the observer. And that's actually why, in a subtle way, the absurdity of their philosophical position is revealed by just introducing another observer into the equation. Like, oh, well, if you think it's fine, if you think you have this rock-solid argument that's completely convincing to you for why you can wear a fur coat or a leather coat, why don't you just wear it to a vegan protest? And you can tell those people the same thing you told me so passionately. If you really believe in this, if you really believe in eating kosher food, you're going to eat kosher food all the time. If you believe in wearing secondhand leather and secondhand fur, you're going to wear secondhand leather and secondhand fur all the time. It's not going to change with the question of who's watching, who's the witness, who's the observer. But in the same sense, the anti-natalists, they'll talk about the tragedy of having your own child die, before you yourself have died as a parent, as if this is some kind of objectively real value that exists independent of the person observing it, perceiving it, suffering it, experiencing it. Now, my daughter is 5 years old. She has had a wonderful life. She's an incredibly joyous, happy kid at 5. She has not yet seen many of the sorrows of this world. If she is suddenly struck by a bolt of lightning and dies, that's a tragedy from my perspective. For me, that's a tragedy. Whether or not that's a tragedy for her, I think is almost meaningless from the perspective of someone who ceased to exist. There is no, her life, its joys and its sorrows are completely at an end. And whether or not it's a tragedy from the perspective of some kind of abstract notion like nature or all of the human race, or even, say, the Census Bureau, government Department of Statistics, this also becomes a bit absurd. I'm now 39 years old. I think many people could say I've had a wonderful life. Unlike a 5-year-old, I've had a life that certainly had a great deal of sorrow, a great deal of suffering, but nevertheless, I've had a wonderful life. It's been tremendously rewarding and interesting and what have you. Um, honestly, sorry, if I think about people I've actually known, people who I've known well enough to have an opinion, I don't know if I've ever met anyone, if I've ever known anyone who had a better life than I did, a more wonderful life than I did. I'm sure they're out there, but in terms of the people where I've, like, even including my professors, the professors who've really shared with me what their life has been like, enough for me to judge or have an opinion. So, there's a lot of people have to endure suffering, but that doesn't mean you don't have a meaningful life or a wonderful life. Now, nevertheless, at age 39, if I'm struck by lightning and I die tomorrow, that would be a tragedy from my mother's perspective, but not from mine. You see, it's like, oh, I had a full, wonderful life. What are you talking about? I saw the Mekong River. I mean, what do you want? I saw everything there was for me to see. I went everywhere there was for me to go. You know, I've seduced beautiful women and been seduced by them. I mean, whatever. I've lived a very full life, and I managed to read Aristotle's Politics twice. Once when I was 19 and once when I was 39. What a life. um, it's slightly absurd to say from my perspective that my life would end in tragedy if I'm struck by lightning. But sure, my mother would say, "Oh, he was only 39. He had so much potential. There were all these other things he could have done with his life. All these other things he wanted to do." For her, it's a tragedy, right? Now, in reality, the quote unquote objective perspective that these people imagine is really a theological or theistic perspective. They imagine that there is some kind of God, whether that's a Christian God or not, observing these things and judging right and wrong and good and bad. And the perspective of Inventum specifically, and of many of the anti-natalists I've spoken to, I guess I can say most, but not many, because I haven't spoken to that many. But they really do rely on a kind of crypto-theological sense that suffering and evil and death, that the values these things have aren't their subjective perspective. It's not because they love this particular child or they love this particular middle-aged man. It's not because of their values and their hopes and their aspirations. It's not from my perspective or another human perspective that this is a tragedy or this is sad. No, no, no. They think there's an absolute reality to this being evil, the experience of death being evil. And actually, objectively, there is no reason why a human being dying should be more evil than a human being falling asleep. And for many of us, the experience of death is precisely the same as falling asleep, after which we simply don't wake up again. So if you think one is evil, objectively, I think you'd have to believe the other is evil also. In reality, we live in a world where all the things we consider objective are really just intersubjective, which is many subjective people agree to disagree about what they're supposed to mean or what values they're supposed to have. And the flip side of this is, for me, it's just hilarious, the secondhand leather argument, that no, 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 because my brother used to wear this coat before me, it's okay. Like, objectively, this is no longer wearing the dismembered body parts of an animal. Objectively, it's okay. Except when you're around other vegans, right? Except when you're around people who actually believe what it is you say you believe. Isn't that an interesting limit for where your supposedly objective, supposedly real values and judgments all come to an end? All right, guys, there is a playlist on nihilism, some of my least popular and most thought-provoking videos about my own approach to epistemology, metaphysics, philosophy in general, which I call historical nihilism. We'll see what becomes of this channel. As I already said, I'm going back to school, so you won't be quite so burdened with videos expressing my unpopular political perspective. Otherwise, guys, support the channel for $1 a month. Send me messages on Patreon. Hit me up.
À-bas-le-ciel.